She is the Director of Programs in the Office of Financial Empowerment at the New York City Department of Consumer and Worker Protection. She has a passion for social impact and leads a team dedicated to building financial health for low-income New Yorkers. She has a bachelor's degree from American University and a master's in public administration from New York University. She and her husband are conscious parents of energetic, nearly 4-year-old twins, and conscious parents and twins. I salute to you all, okay? Because the one I have that I'm trying to consciously parent takes me there, okay? And we also have Lillian Williams. She is a first-time pregnant mom who is super excited about the arrival of her baby daughter. On this journey, she has learned so much about pregnancy and newborn care from Birthing the Magic Collaborative. Lillian received her undergraduate degree in East Asian Studies from Columbia University and works as an interpreter for English and Mandarin. She currently lives in Phoenix, Arizona with her husband. So thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Like I said, please be sure to leave your questions in this chat. And we are going to kick right off with a question for Dr. Erica. And we're going to ask you, Dr. Erica, to explain why it is crucial for us to have candid discussions about pregnancy and postpartum.
Thank you so much. And I'm so excited to be here. I'm going to start this off with a very quick story. As you all know, when we're in medical school, I'm a psychiatrist, but we still rotate through everything. And I still remember being on OB, and probably the one thing other than newborn nursery that I miss being a psychiatrist is delivering babies. And one of the reasons I think it's so important to have these conversations is I just remember how childbirth, it was beautiful, it was a miracle, and it was gross all at the same time. You're like, how is all this happening at the same time? Because on the movies, it all looks so cute and sexy. And in real life, it's still beautiful, but there's just all this stuff going on. So I think it's important to have all these candid discussions so that people are truly prepared for what this adventure is. And it can be beautiful, it can be very meaningful, but being a parent may be the hardest thing that you ever do in your life. I'm also a child psychiatrist, so I spend time with parents all day long. And it's just so important to be in a place where now we're having these candid discussions about how you're going to be able to have good mental health after this wonderful bundle or bundles of joy appears, and your life is forever changed. And sometimes people don't know what to do with that.
I absolutely love that you brought up how beautiful childbirth is, but also that we need to prepare for postpartum, because that is something that I did not do. I was so focused on creating this beautiful birthing experience and focused on like planning out all the details from I want the lights to be low in the room and who I wanted to be my birth support team. But I kind of forgot that I needed to create support and plan for postpartum as well. And so now that's something that I try to educate all of my on as a doula, is to let's have these conversations about pregnancy and postpartum. And there's also, I've been seeing something float around social media a lot, and I've been trying to clear up this misconception, is that postpartum and postpartum depression are two different things. Could you give us a little bit more clarity?
So I'm glad you brought that up, because I remember us having this conversation, and it's ironic we're doing this program today because actually my cousin's wife was admitted to the hospital for preeclampsia of like less than 2 weeks after birth yesterday. So I was like, I guess it comes in handy we're having this talk. She's doing all right. She'll probably be discharged tomorrow. But the simple way to look at it is postpartum is a time period. It's nothing more, nothing less. It's a descriptor. Think of it as like after birth, postpartum.
That's it.
While there can be other things related to postpartum. So a lot of times, I know, Ray, you mentioned postpartum depression. There can be probably the two most most talked about mental health conditions that are specifically postpartum are postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis, with postpartum depression being significantly more common. Statistics range anywhere from 1 in 7 to 1 in 10 women. So around 10 to 20% of women experience postpartum depression. But just keeping in mind that people will just say postpartum, and some just getting clarity when people say it, or being clear when you say it out there in the audience of what you're actually referring to, so that the conversation is going to be helpful.
Absolutely. And I like that you also mentioned postpartum psychosis, because that's not something that I heard of until I became a doula, actually. I made it all the way through nursing school without learning what that was. And the more that I researched postpartum mood disorders, the more I learned about postpartum psychosis. And I feel like it's still not talked about that much. And alongside postpartum anxiety, I was diagnosed with postpartum anxiety after my son, and I didn't even think anything about the symptoms that I was having until my therapist called me out on it. So that's why I'm glad that we're having these conversations, so that we can know the signs and support those people around us, and those moms who will be navigating postpartum, so that we can look out for them.
I love it. And the other thing just to remember is, just as anything in mental health, that what gives people and puts them in this realm of these diagnoses is level of impairment typically. And there usually is a clinical criteria and then like a certain level of impairment. Just like you can have days where you don't feel that happy, but you don't necessarily have major depressive disorder. Is that there are a lot of emotional changes that can happen in the postpartum period that can still be uncomfortable or distressing, that may not necessarily reach to the clinical criteria of postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, postpartum psychosis. And they also sometimes talk about postpartum PTSD, but not that often. I don't really hear that often. But let's be real, for quite a few women, pregnancy and childbirth is traumatic. So just keeping in mind in the discussion that we'll be talking about mental health, but it's not only couched if you make this diagnosis, because it's just important to support your mental health in general.
Absolutely. I wish that I would have, and I'm not going to make this all about me. We're going to move on in a minute to Grace, but I wish that I would have considered my history before pregnancy, put a little bit more emphasis on building those supports, which we will talk about. It's like how to support yourself so you can thrive after having a baby. So, but yes, I want to give Grace a chance to share and talk to us about your postpartum experience, and if you prepared for postpartum while you were still pregnant, and how. We want to hear all the details.
Sure. So I did. I tried my best to. My husband is Chinese, and in Chinese culture, like actually most tribal and indigenous cultures around the world, there is a period called the sitting month after you give birth, and it can be from 30 days to 100 days. Usually, it's about 40. And there's foods that you should eat. If you're very traditional, you're told to avoid taking showers or washing your hair, because you need to restore your chi and restore your energy after giving birth. So knowing that me honoring that tradition in some way was important to my mother-in-law, I started doing some research into what does that look like for American moms, and how could I integrate that? There's a really great book called The First 40 Days that was written by a woman after she went through the sitting month period and did her research into this period. So some of the things started with like making sure that I was going to have someone here to take care of me and take care of the babies, and help my husband, because we live far away from family, and we knew we weren't going to be able to do it alone. So my mom came and moved in with us for the first 6 weeks, and then my mother-in-law moved in for 3 weeks after that. So I was alone with my kids for the first time, really like 9 weeks after they were born. And they did all of the night feedings, all of, helped me with diaper changing, so that really when I got home from the hospital, all I had to worry about was learning how to, breastfeed, um, establishing my milk and pumping, and then bonding with babies and recuperating from my C-section. So I got to have a lot of rest. The idea of sleepless nights was foreign to me because I was taken such good care of during that time period.
Your experience sounds like an absolute dream and something that I wish I could give to every mom in America. And I think it highlights like your ability to focus on you and rest and regenerative recovery when you have built in like that type of support for yourself to be able to do that. And that is just that's so beautiful.
It really is. I think, I've heard all of these horror stories in my pregnancy, especially from twin moms that are just like, after birth, it's just survival mode. And I'm like, oh, that sounds really scary. And I, they also give you these like really strict rules, especially with twins, that you have to get them on the same schedule because otherwise it's going to be impossible to manage. So they never are, and some twin parents, they never get a chance to like individuate. They have to always be like, one wakes up to drink to for any reason, you have to wake the other one up. You have to feed them on the same schedule. And my twins were very different human beings from the moment they came out.
Wow.
So I don't think they would have ever liked it. Um, to be forced on that schedule. So I really, really, deeply appreciate that opportunity. I know it's not possible for everyone, either because of the nature of their relationships with their family members, or because their family members are not, and, our case, retired from my mom, and very tenured in her job for my mother-in-law, and had that vacation time to do that. In that case, I've told friends, you save up and be able to hire the baby nurse here in New York City. That's very common. If people ask you what they can pay for, ask them to pay for that. If not that, ask, your friends to, tell your friends this is really what you need. Ask for the meal train. Designate someone to set it up for you. It's a really easy website that they can help arrange for people to bring you food on certain days. Or, hire a postpartum doula, whatever it takes to make sure that you're not just in like a frantic survival mode. I'm seeing in the Q&A, how did I adapt once it was just my husband, babies, and myself? I think I adapted pretty well. I hope. I think what was nice is that I'd had that time to really ease into it. My mother-in-law is kind of a no-nonsense woman. So while my mom doted on me and was like very much, taking care of everything while she was with us, my mother-in-law pretty much by the end of the first week was like, no, I'm going to give you, space to really try mothering on your own. So I did have a couple of times where I met some, new moms groups by myself. She went with me one time, and then another time I went with just one baby to mother baby yoga. So I had a chance while she was here to practice that solo time with twins, and wasn't kind of thrust 9 weeks in completely by myself. But yes, the first day though, I remember like the first Monday that my husband left for work, and it was just like, oh, we have all these hours to fill, just me and these two people. And we did fine until 5 p.m. when the witching hour started. And if no one has told you about the witching hour yet, I'm going to leave that secret for when it happens to you, because it is, no, I won't. All babies seem to just have this period in the late afternoon, I guess, or mini babies, where they just cry for no reason, inconsolably. And you just have to figure out what consoles them and what calms them. And so I figured out that it was just rotating them, me on the floor for the hour or two when they would do that every afternoon. And we got by that. It was great.
Wow. I think it's just so beautiful how you explained that your mother-in-law kind of like just held your hand, but also gave you space to figure it out on your own. And I just imagining, her just like being there in the background, like, I'm here if you need support, but I'm gonna let you do your thing and figure it out. Like, I feel like in all the mom groups, I just hear horror stories about mother-in-laws. So it's really refreshing to hear something very positive. And I'm curious, Dr. Erica, what was your experience like? And Lillian, if you have any questions for Grace as you are preparing for postpartum, we can take some time to explore that too.
I have no kids.
No, I'm sorry.
No. But I've been there. I've held kids when they were born because I went into the delivery room with my good friend. But no, I'm just the fun auntie.
Listen, my sisters are thoroughly enjoying being the fun aunties and have said that my experience has done it for them and they are good on kids. So, I mean, but as a support person, how have you supported your friends through postpartum? Like, have you been the one to do the meal train? And I'm sure you know all of these things, so you aren't like just the typical family member.
Well, ironically, I have one good friend that had kids a lot. It just in the fluke of nature, most of my closest friends were all single with no kids. But for her, kind of one of the biggest things I did is I actually went to the hospital and was with her for her delivery.
Wow.
So she had twins via C-section, and I held her babies before she did.
Wow. Oh my gosh. That is such a special moment. And I think it just speaks to like how if you don't have that village, you can create that village to have the support that you need to thrive during parenting. Just like Grace was saying, if you need to recruit your friends and give them a job and say, you're going to be on baby duty, you will be on meal duty, you will be on cleaning duty. If you need to hire the postpartum doula or a night nurse, I do have some nurse friends who do night nursing. So whatever you need to do to have that support. So Lillian, what are some things that you are planning for your own postpartum?
Well, thank you so much for having me here. Before I answer that question, I just want to thank you all for this opportunity. I'm a first-time pregnant mom. Just want to introduce myself as someone who's now 36 and a half weeks pregnant for the first time ever. And so for somebody like myself who's going on this journey for the first time, it's just an extraordinary opportunity to learn and grow and be around people who are experts and advocates in this field. So I just want to create space and say thank you for that.
You're welcome.
As I'm on this journey and it's my first time having a child, you can imagine all of the things that I'm thinking about. So in preparing for postpartum, I'm also preparing for childbirth and labor, right? So that's a question I actually have for the panel. We women in my situation are in a position where we don't know exactly what we don't know. And especially when it's the first time around, hey, what are some things that we can do to prevent things like, or to help offset things like postpartum depression or anything else that we may not be aware of? Luckily, I've been taking advantage of some resources online. NIH is a good friend of mine, like, figuratively speaking, because I like to look at things online and research as much as I can. And I look at CDC and I also listen to my OBGYN. But coming from you guys, people who've experienced women, helped women as a doula, Dr. Erica's done a lot of work in this space. Grace, you've had children. What would you tell yourself? What would something you wish you knew to prepare for postpartum?
I have something. Again, I say, my name is Dr. Erica. I treat kids and moms, but I have no kids. is that the first thing I would say, and people don't talk about this a lot, get a therapist. Because it's a stressful period. There are a lot of unknowns. Parenthood's one of those things that you're going to do the best you can with what you have. There's no person that is perfect, and something invariably is going to go wrong. I've never heard a narrative that everything is perfect, everything is great, someone hasn't gotten dropped or something at some point. There's always something. So one of the things I would say is the great thing about the access to mental health that we have right now, especially with so much virtual, is to do that, to have someone create an additional safe space that's totally neutral, that is held just for you to be able to process through all of these thoughts and emotions while you're dealing with all that goes along with preparing to bring life, dealing with your body, dealing with how you're feeling, how much energy you have, how many things you have to do. Because for a lot of people, unless they're put on strict bed rest, it's not like the world stops just because you got pregnant. And then to be able to have that additional support with someone that you're already connected with when you give birth, to just be there as an additional support. And also, I know you mentioned that just looking for ways to prevent things is one of the risk factors, is actually for postpartum depression, is having had depression in the past. So I just think it's really important. If it was up to me, I'd be like, Oprah, you get a therapist, you get a therapist. I feel like everybody could have a therapist right now because people are on the struggle bus. But if I had to say one high yield thing, get therapists.
Yes, I'm going to let Grace answer, and then I will chime in with my long answer.
So I would say the most important thing is to manage your expectations. Your doctor, I saw a lot of doctors when I was pregnant because I had every teeny tiny pregnancy related like ailment complication that wasn't major until I did a preeclampsia towards the end. But everyone tells you, oh, this will get better or this will go away when the baby's here. And they act like there's this like magical switch that happens, like the baby exits your uterus and then ta-da, the prenatal carpal tunnel goes away, everything is just going to be solved, and now you're going to feel wonderful. And it's a transition. And I wish I could say 3.5 years in that I knew when the transition would end, but it is an ongoing transition. And having the baby, or babies in my case, does not cure all of the parts of pregnancy that were hard. Your feet aren't going to go back, and how all of the stress and anxiety and anything else that you're feeling in the moment of pregnancy does not magically alleviate because the baby's here. It's just replaced with new anxieties and fears and questions and complications, and it's constantly replaced with new things. So I would absolutely echo having a therapist. If you are on medication before you got pregnant or have been medicated in the past, it might be worthwhile. And I was. So I highly recommend, if you can find someone for medication management, and be prepared to jump into that conversation either prepartum or as soon after, because there are different medications that you can take when you're breastfeeding versus not. And Dr. Erica is far more qualified to talk about that than I am. But being prepared for that and being comfortable with that, and finding a doctor who is comfortable treating you while you're pregnant or breastfeeding is easier said than done, but really necessary. And then just, in managing your expectations, be compassionate to yourself. It is okay to be disappointed that you're not having the magical moment that you thought you were going to have, and that the switch didn't flip like your doctor promised you it would. It's disappointing and it's hard. And so you just have to be, forgiving to yourself that you didn't bounce back, because you're not supposed to bounce back.
Gotcha. And I also wanted to just co-sign with getting a therapist. And if you don't already have one, like interviewing some while you're already pregnant, because it's much easier to make that decision when you're in a good headspace and you're not sleep deprived, if that is your story, than it is to figure out your insurance, find a therapist, get on their schedule, develop a relationship with them when you're in the middle of having a newborn. And that's just my experience. And like something that I tell my clients is to just go ahead and plan for your postpartum support team, just like people plan for, okay, I got to find my OBGYN that I like and I love. I'm going to find a doula, and I'm going to find this lactation consultant, and we make a birth team. We'll go ahead and find a postpartum support team of providers so that you don't have to do it when you're in the middle and you're in the thick of things. And also, don't be afraid to tell people that they cannot enter into your space postpartum, because that can also play a role in how you feel and how your mood is. So also honor your postpartum safe space as well. I don't know if that resonates with anybody else or not.
Yeah, I think yes. I you know, there were moments of like nerves about like, I live in New York City. I live in a small 2-bedroom apartment. So it was going to be suddenly like 2 twins. And then my mom and I had not lived together for nearly 20 years when she moved in with us after the twins were born. So like there was, moments of nervousness about how is this going to work? And so we had, a few conversations about like, okay, this is how we're planning on handling some of the parenting things. This is what our plan is. This is what our vision is. This is, what we're planning on eating. Like sometimes down to that, like minute day-to-day things. But then also like saying to friends and, some of my friends who are like, oh, can we drop by? Or, oh, whatever. No, I'd rather you not. You could do this instead, or I'm not sure. Being really open ahead of time about what you're comfortable with and being flexible that what you're comfortable with might change. So my, stepsister recently had a baby, and her original plan was that she was going to nest and she didn't want anybody around. And about 4 days in, she's like, if that's the case, I'm never taking a shower. So she was mentioned it to my mom, and my mom was like, okay, I think you're gonna have to change your plan. And my mom just, called her mom and said, maybe you just show up and say, I'm just here for an hour, go take your shower, go take a nap, and then I'm leaving. And they were able to use that as like, I'm just here, not necessarily whether you want it or not, but like, I'm going to give you that moment, and then for you to decide how much more you want. And then she was able to think about, for the coming days after that, okay, I think I'm ready for you to come for a couple of hours and, be able to ask for help.
Your family want to adopt some family members, or because I want to join your family right now. No, but and I really love that she was like, I need to take a shower. I'm going to be okay with asking for help to take a shower, because I've talked to a lot of moms who feel like we're not allowed to take those moments anymore. And that's another thing I was going to say, like, to thrive, you have to be okay with saying, no, I am still going to do some things for me, and I'm not going to lose all of me in motherhood, right? Like, I deserve to shower, or I deserve to go on that walk. So I'm going to put my baby in a baby carrier and we're going to go outside. Like, you have to be okay with setting some boundaries and saying, I matter too.
Absolutely. I had a friend who recently had twins, and she asked me, okay, what should I have? What should I do? And I said, really, one of the things I would say is buy yourself the comfiest pajamas you can find. And like stock up on the fact that you are going to be home for 4 or 5 weeks, mostly at home. You might go out a little bit, but like, what do you need to make your bed the most comfortable place it can be? if you need new sheets, get new sheets. If you need, make sure you have like 2 weeks worth of clean underwear. And there's the question about like the family members and partners feel pressure too. And like, I made sure that my husband had 2 weeks worth of everything he needed because he was going back to work after 2 weeks. I was like, we might not be able to take care of the things for you. So do you have 2 weeks worth of undershirts? Do you have 2 weeks worth of underwear? Do you have 2 weeks worth of socks? Do you have all of those things that you need to serve for you to get by in the rest of your life so that you're not bothering us because all we can worry about is the babies and then I can worry about myself. So I got myself yummy pajamas and I got, some nice ginger shower cream from Oregon's because in Chinese tradition, you bathe in ginger. And I was like, well, I don't know how I'm going to bathe in ginger, but I can at least have the ginger smell. And it really was like just delicious and lovely. And just having that tiny, tiny, teeny, tiny thing that's for you when everything else is centered on the babies is a really nice respite that feels superficial, but it's just a delicious treat.
Absolutely. And I know we've been having such good conversation that I've just had the chat like over here slid into the side. But I know we only have about 20 minutes left. So I do want to give us a chance to answer these questions. So I'm scrolling all the way to the top. And one question was, Dr. Erica, what are some things mom can do when babies seem inconsolable and she is stressed? Can't hear you. We can't.
I had to get to the mute button. I'm going to give you just a couple of quick things. The first thing is if a child is unconsolably crying, is you want to actually take them to the pediatrician to make sure, see if it's just regular colic, if they're having some GI distress, some difficulty tolerating, especially formula or something else, if there's something going on, and that's the reason why the child is inconsolable, because kids can't tell us what's happening. So the first thing is go to the pediatrician to make sure nothing's actually wrong. The second thing is part of what I think is helpful to do, especially leading up to having your baby, is to start getting comfortable with having positive self-talk to yourself so that when this happens, you don't end up going down the rabbit hole of a negative self-talk spiral of feeling like you're a failure or you're a bad mom because your kid cries a lot. Sometimes it feels like luck of the draw. Some people have these kids, they come out and they're like, I had the best. I literally was talking to a lady the other day. She was the best baby ever. She was perfect. She hardly ever cried. She slept all night immediately. And that's not everybody. So just remembering that it's not a sign that you're a bad mom if your kid cries a lot. The next thing is also start paying attention to your own emotional barometer, because there can be some transfer of energy that if you start getting really frantic or you're really upset or you're really, intense or irritable, that there can be some transfer of energy, and working on strategies to get to a calming place can also be helpful. I'm a big fan. I'll drop it in the chat in a few minutes. There's an article with 30 different grounding techniques, and they're all very simple, pretty quick, that I think could be helpful in some of these times just to help you reset, because it can just be difficult because naturally you love your baby. You don't want your baby to cry. It makes you feel like something's wrong and you messed up. And the next is also, as everyone's been talking about, having support is you may need, that may be a time that you need to take breaks with you and your partner. You may need to walk outside a few minutes so you don't hear the child. Doesn't mean you don't love them. You may need someone to come up and be back up for a little while every once in a while, especially for people with just kind of these fussy, inconsolable babies. And also remembering that in general, it will end. It's going to feel like forever, but remembering that it will actually end. But one of the biggest things is having support and just getting your child checked.
Grace, did you have anything that you wanted to share there?
No, just all of it, and that it does end. we took the twins to the doctor, and they're like, oh yes, it's purple crying, it's witching hour, there's different names for it. It's like, roll with it. And so it was another twin parent who's like, you just have to get used to the child crying. And I think that positive self-talk and just being able to say to yourself, that's normal, it's going to happen. And knowing when you can say, like, I might just have to let you cry for like a moment, a tiny moment, get myself centered, get what I need. If it's, if I knew I was going to have to sit on the floor and just rotate them and like hold one for a little bit and then hold the other one for a little bit. And the easiest way to do that was to like have my bottle of water, have a cup of tea, have something nearby so that I could, steal a sip, have the remote ready, and like take care of me and be able to zone out and just rotate holding and comforting for that couple of minutes or that hour sometimes that they were in that phase, and then come back to it and be as present as I could.
Absolutely. And I love that you mentioned like taking your child to the doctor, because I feel like a lot of times people think that we just have to suffer through these really extreme bouts of crying that's not just witching hour, but people think that it is. So like pay attention also like to your intuition. And if you need to like advocate or see a doctor, like see if it is reflux or something else. I mean, my child ended up being diagnosed with allergies, and that's why he was so grumpy, because he was allergic to eggs. So there could be something there that's making it just a little bit harder. But even during those times, I remember I would just have to say, you know what, this is going to end. I'm not a bad mom. I am not failing. We're going to do skin to skin. We're both going to regulate. We're going to turn on these low frequency sounds, and we are going to get through this. And don't be afraid to put the baby down and walk away. If you need to, then come back, because it's just what you have to do sometimes.
The floor on the blanket is a perfectly safe place for baby to be, unless you have like a dog or something, or other, pets. Like, leave them there on their back safely for a moment, and take care of you for that little bit of time. You're better than me in the low frequency sounds. I watched every bad reality show on Netflix in winter 2020. Cheer, The Circle, Love is Blind, all of them.
Oh my goodness. I would definitely watch way too many episodes of everything while he was cluster feeding, but in those moments of crying, I was like, we're gonna have to bring it down. We do have another question, that is, how can we break the stigma around postpartum mental health and encourage new parents to seek help when needed?
I guess that's a me. I say one of the first things is by having conversations like these and having conversations, honest conversations with how people are actually feeling, along with conversations that good mental health is a human right. It's not a special condition. It's not something you have at just brief periods of your life. And I think if we start having conversations about mental health being a human right and something you deserve, and understanding that pregnancy and having kids is a whole adventure, is that by starting to have these conversations and also connecting with community, I think probably one of the biggest things, especially in the process, there's one thing as far as trying to move the needle as a society and an organizational structure. But in the meantime, because we know all those things move slowly, and apparently half of America does not like women's reproductive rights anyway, that finding community, be it in your immediate friends, be it maybe in people in church, mommy and me groups. There are a million. I feel like one of the best things that came out of the pandemic is it's a million Facebook groups or meetups or subgroups on different platforms, just finding your people that are in the trenches, in the struggle with you. I think that will help, because also it decreases the stigma by the fact that I really haven't talked to anybody hardly ever that said all of this was great and they felt great the whole time. So I think as people continue to have open and honest conversations, it'll help break the stigma, because the norm isn't actually feeling great all the time. I wish it was, but we're asking you to embark on an adventure that's very different than what you've experienced. And even people that are parents and have had multiple pregnancies and different kids, pregnancies can vary. The season of your life you're in can be different. Children can be very different as far as personalities, temperament, what their health conditions are, who's a crier, who's a sleeper. Not to get into family dynamics of how the other kids deal with when you bring another kid in house, is that just being able to have these conversations. But I think it's very important to get tied to community, because being alone is probably one of the next worst things that's going to happen for your mental health if you're just by yourself trying to manage all of this, because it's not really a one-person job. Big ups to all the single mothers out there. I don't know how you do it.
Yeah, I just want to say I thank you for shedding light just on all of that. Mental health, the postpartum depression. See, as a person who's pregnant for the first time, I've been alarmed by how many women who, when they hear about me being pregnant or others in my situation being pregnant, they always say, watch out for postpartum depression. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't even know what that is. I've never had any history of anything like that. And it's quite alarming to hear how it has actually affected so many women who otherwise were mentally, from a mental health standpoint, perfectly healthy. So I think more conversations need to be had like this. For me, in preparing on this journey, y'all, my saving grace has been my mom, who is a registered nurse. So she's retired, but she was a midwife in London back in the 80s and 90s. But, and I really latch on to her advice. And I really appreciate all the things that were shared. Grace, you telling your story about how having your family help you in different ways, that has helped me kind of create a diagram in my head about, okay, what I need to do when my mom comes to support me for her first granddaughter when a baby arrives. And so I'm actually taking notes on, hey, we'll actually have to stock up for a few weeks. These are things that I wasn't really thinking about, fast forwarding to think. So this has really answered a lot of my questions. I don't know, as far as recovering from a physical standpoint, if there's anything else you guys have to share as far as recovery, because I may have to do a C-section because babies breech, among other reasons. But thank you so much.
I was actually just making a note of two other resources that I wanted to make sure that I shared, and one of them was recovery from a physical standpoint. Your body does, like I said, it's not going to bounce back. Everything changes. So if you are in an area where you have access to pelvic floor PT, or it sometimes is called, different things by different practitioners. So pelvic floor PT, postpartum PT, postpartum specialties, every kind of PT, physical therapy office calls it different. That is kind of the top tier and the best thing that you can do. Insurance often doesn't cover it, or they don't take insurance. So if that's the case for you, which was the case for me, there's an app called Every Mother. It's a subscription app, and it's got some really great exercises that you can do to help, re-strengthen your core, address any diastasis recti, which is the separation of abdominal muscles that happens because of pregnancy. And it can, it's really helped me, and it's an app that I still subscribe to and I still do. Because these kids wreck my body. Then another great app that is wonderful in both prenatal and postnatal, and even after going through fertility treatments, if even it's Expectful. It is a meditation app that has guided meditations for every phase in the journey. I found it really helpful and calming to be able to do the daily meditations that were timed to where I was in pregnancy and then where I was postpartum. It really makes a difference. I did want to jump quickly back to the question about how to support friends and family as well. The two questions that I would ask any new mother are, how are you? And do not let her off the phone until she answers how she is. Not how baby is, not how she is in relation to baby. How is she? How is she doing physically? Is she taking care of herself? Has she taken a shower? Is she making sure that she's keeping her C-section wound dry? All of that. How is she? And then what do you need to feel taken care of? I had not heard that question until recently in another group that I was in, and it was just such a powerful question. And she might not know the answer to it in that moment, but I swear to you, it will stay in her mind, and she will be able to come back to, like, what do I need right now to be taken care of? Do I need food? Do I need you to DoorDash me some ice cream? Do I need you to come over and hold the baby? Do I, need you to help me craft the text message to say, like, I need someone else to come hold the baby? Whatever it is. But those are the two questions that I would ask to just help someone think about what they need and to center it on mom, because everyone else is going to be asking about the baby, and everything else medically, except for the 1 6-week appointment, is about the baby. And moms need at least one person to be on their side.
I absolutely love that question. My friend asked me something similar the other day. She said, what time of day do you feel most unsupported in motherhood? And how can I support you in that time? And I thought that was just so profound for her. But it really made me pause and reflect and think, what do I need? And she's like, I asked that to all, like, new moms and single moms. Shout out to the single moms. I don't know how we're doing it either. But that is a really good question. Like, what do you need? Because new moms gloss over themselves all the time because everybody else makes it all about the baby. We did have one more question that I really wanted us to get to, and that was someone who said, I had a friend who said her friends told her to go in the bathroom and cry, then come out and everything was okay. Dr. Erica, can you speak to why it's not at all healthy and wrap us on up?
Oh, thank you. I feel so much pressure for the wrap up. Why it's not okay is emotions don't magically disappear. So most likely, if there is a reason you feel like crying and you go into the bathroom and cry, even though crying can be one of ways to potentially complete the stress cycle, is for a lot of people, if you're at a point where you're going in the bathroom and crying, that there's something else going on. It's something that actually needs to be addressed, because one of the things that happens so often is when you ignore things emotionally, they build up, and they build up where you will feel it emotionally. But the other thing is they build up in your body. So you may end up feeling more and more sad or anxious or nervous. And one of the things we don't talk about quite as much is pretty much almost anything can look like irritability. So anxiety can be irritable, depression can be irritable, trauma can be irritable. So it's just not going to put you in the best place if you start becoming emotionally overloaded and overwhelmed because you weren't able to actually process or deal with emotions or what was causing it. The other thing is how a lot of this stuff shows up in your body: headaches, stomach aches, insomnia, shakiness, feeling like your heart's beating fast, or like you have palpitations, feeling like you're going to throw up. Just a lot of things that just aren't fun, and some people get to the point where it's almost like they're lightheaded. It's just all kinds of things that aren't going to function well for you, because number one, they don't feel good. Number two is that it's not going to put you in the best place to be able to survive as a mom. In addition, it can affect your appetite, and you can either have a high appetite where you're trying to eat everything in sight, and then you get upset because you gained weight, because nobody likes gaining weight, or you're not eating, and then it's hard for you to have enough nutrition to have the energy to be a mom or to adequately breastfeed and those kinds of things. So it's not a good idea to just go cry in the bathroom.
Thank you so much for sharing, Dr. Erica. This has been such an amazing talk, and I feel like we could keep going and going and going. But I hope that you all got some takeaway tips. There are some amazing resources in the chat. There are grounding exercises. There's a link to Dr. Erica's website. There's a link to her podcast. I believe that Grace shared some resources also. If they aren't in the chat, then you can get them in the follow-up. I want to thank you all so much for joining us. And I want to encourage you all to join the programs on tomorrow. We're going to talk about reclaiming your sexuality and intimacy. And there'll also be a talk for empowerment of NICU mamas. So you do not want to miss these talks. All of them are amazing. And I'm not just saying that because I am here doing this with the Magic Collaborative. But yeah, thank you all so much to our beautiful panelists. It was a joy, and I hope you all have a good evening or a good night, depending on where you are. Bye, y'all. Bye.
Mommy.